Toys. Plastic playthings designed for the sole purpose of getting parents to spend money on something to keep their kids occupied while they do more important adult things. At least that's the old definition of toys. And that definition has been in a constant state of evolution for many years now. With more and more adults becoming collectors of these little plastic people, and the hobby going more and more mainstream, toys are no longer made just for children. But when did this start exactly? There's probably no one answer to that question, as no doubt many adult collectors are now still very interested in a lot of the things that they loved as kids. But there is one man who knew that he had characters that would make great toys, and he knew that those toys should be made for his fans specifically, for the collector. We're going to take a trip back to 1994 to talk about Todd McFarlane and the launch of the Spawn line of action figures today on Toysplosion.
Welcome to my world. From Todd McFarlane Spawn, Cygor, Sea-Spawn, Shadowhawk, Max, Clown 2, Exoskeleton. All new, all action, all yours from the world of Spawn. Each sold separately. Welcome to my world.
While the wave from the 1980s certainly lasted into the early 90s, by 1994 it was clear that the landscape was changing. The Ninja Turtles were still around, but they were nowhere near the level of popularity as the new kings of the boys' toy aisles, the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. And by this point, children had already been heavily entrenched in the 16-bit video game wars between the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis, and they were on the verge of a new generation of gaming consoles with the impending launch of the Sega Saturn. 90s Tood was in full swing, Tood of which you could certainly see across the covers of your favorite comic books. Ooh, shiny. Just 2 years earlier, the comics industry had quite the shakeup. A group of 8 creators all banded together. Todd McFarlane, Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, Mark Silvestri, Eric Larson, Jim Valentino, Wills Potasio, and Chris Claremont were looking for a venue for creator-owned properties which could be published without having to give up copyrights. It was dubbed the Exodus, since many of these creators were known for their work on the X-Men books. And in 1992, Image Comics was founded. In May of that same year, Todd McFarlane introduced the world to Spawn. Todd was already well liked by comics fans for his work on Spider-Man before helping to start Image Comics. With Image, he now had the opportunity to tell stories with his own characters. Spawn was a character that he created when he was just 16 years old, and with the first issue released in 1992, the character found immediate success, with that first issue selling 1.7 million copies. With this success, Todd was ready to do more with his character. Many sources cite that at this time, Todd had begun collaborating with Mattel on a line of action figures based on the Spawn comic books. But this quickly fell apart as the two parties could not agree on how to produce the toys to McFarlane's satisfaction, leading to Todd reclaiming those rights. However, I had the opportunity to go straight to the source and talk to Todd McFarlane himself about this, and his version of the story is a bit different.
So people have a tendency to look at charts and they just go, hey, this thing called Spawn, this new thing's at the top of the chart. So once that happened, then the phone started ringing, and some of the people that were phoning were the toy companies, right? So the toy companies started phoning. So it was I got a phone call pretty much from all the big players, right? Some of them were a little more aggressive, and And somebody like Mattel actually came in and did a whole presentation and showed me sculpts and packaging and everything else. And it was like, okay. So it wasn't like they had an inside track or they were the favorite. They just were one of many that made their presentation that confirmed to me that what I thought that I needed, which was, in simple terms, I say non-traditional toys being sold in non-traditional places. So what I was sort of asking for, was what I was hoping for, wasn't just, that's not how they sell toys. They're in the 6-year-old, for the most part, 6-year-old selling to mom and dad in traditional places. So I just decided that I'll just give it a whirl myself. Like, how hard can it be to sell plastic goods?
So with that, Todd's Toys had formed. This new company kicked things off with a line of 6 action figures based on the Spawn series of comic books. Now that he had his own company, he could make the toys the way he wanted. The first 6 Spawn figures were unlike anything else on the market at the time. They were highly detailed with a lot more paint applications than you saw on a typical action figure. Each figure came sealed in a plastic case instead of the traditional cardboard blister cards, and also came packaged with an exclusive comic book. The amazing, grotesque details of the characters, coupled with the higher price point of the action figures, meant one thing. These were not made for kids. No, these toys were made for collectors. The first wave of figures wasn't too different from other toys at the time as far as the overall builds go. Spawn stands around the 5-inch mark and features basic articulation at the neck, shoulders, hips, and knees. Where these figures truly stand out are with the highly detailed sculpts and paint deco. Spawn, of course, includes his signature oversized cape as an accessory. It attaches to the figure in a unique fashion. There's an extra L-shaped peg that connects to the figure's back and then plugs into the inside of the cape. You can then fasten that cape around Spawn's neck with the removable skull clasp. The cape can also fold open or closed. A crease in the plastic is flexible enough to allow for this, though it's tricky to get it to stay in any position other than the way it comes out of the packaging. This was the first of many, many figures based on the title character. It's certainly something special, as you can see the DNA of what was to come from the company in the following years. Here's where we start to see that more grotesque, creep factor that you just wouldn't find in action figures geared towards a younger audience. Clown is short, round, and ugly. He has real feel hair sprouting off of his balding head, which actually makes him feel even nastier somehow. The figure only has articulation in his arms, which is also very hollow. That's because he has an action feature. By turning his right arm, the clown head will fold into the body and reveal an ugly demon head in its place. He also includes this giant chicken leg accessory, which is a bit odd, as it has a handle under the bone in order for Clown to hold onto it, but it doesn't quite fit into the figure's hand very well. One thing you can see with this line is that the figures were not stuck to all being just one size. McFarlane attempted to make these guys in scale with each other the best that he could, which resulted in figures of many different sizes in this first wave. Tremor begins to give us some of that larger, heftier figure in the line. He's much bulkier than Spawn. He has an action feature as well. By pressing the button on his left shoulder, his fist springs forward for a punch attack, revealing circuitry on his arm within. So as I was saying, the scale between characters is one of the standouts of this new collector line format. Overkill is massive. He's tall, bulky, and is very heavy when compared to the other figures in this first wave. He is quite an impressive action figure. He's another one in this first wave that includes an action feature, which unfortunately has not aged very well. A spring in his body and a button on his back would allow his head to launch off like a missile. Unfortunately, the head will no longer click down, and this is a figure that I just opened straight out of the packaging. Violator is a bit interesting, because he's more like a bendy toy than he is an action figure. The entire body is made of that soft, wireframe body that allows you to bend and pose the figure all around. This does of course create a bit of a challenge when trying to get him standing on a shelf for display. He does still come with his own action feature. By moving the horn on top of his head, the jaw can open and close. The sculpt is still really well done and quite grotesque, but I can see a bendy figure being a tad disappointing to collectors. Luckily, this would not be the last time McFarlane would release a Violator action figure. The final figure of the first wave was also a variation of the title character, but one that would go on to become a fan favorite of the line. Medieval Spawn has a different look than that main version. His cape isn't quite as big and attaches a bit different, just plugging into the back of his oversized shoulder pads. He comes with this excellent shield that can be held in his right hand or can slide over the wrist on his left arm. The latter is likely preferred, as that also leaves his right hand open to hold on to the included sword to fully arm up the character. This first wave of figures were quite action feature heavy, something that you would eventually see phase out as the company began to focus even more on the high details. Spawn figures became less like action figures and more like little sculptures in the years to come. But along with those more detailed sculpts and collector packaging, these new toys also would start something else that would become a staple of action figure collecting: variants. That's right, not only did we have these 6 new figures to collect, but there were variations to hunt down. Some of these were simple packaging variations. Maybe the card back changed colors, or as in the case of the clown here, you might find him packaged with either the clown face or the demon head. You might find a color variation, like with the original release of Tremor being orange, but then changing to green. Or there could be another variation of a character altogether, like the popular unmasked version of Spawn, lovingly called Hamburger Head by the fans. Even KB Toy Stores got an exclusive all-gold series of the first wave of action figures. Ah, those pesky variants. Sure, it gives you more to hunt down and collect, but it could also be the nightmare of a completionist. The first wave of figures was capped off with 2 vehicles, the Spawnmobile and the Violator Monster Rig, and we even got a Spawn Alley playset. Spawn stole the show at that year's New York Toy Fair, and Toys R Us signed a large contract to carry the toys. They soon became a massive success. Just 1 year later in 1995, trouble popped up with Mattel. You see, Mattel was unhappy with the company being called Todd's Toys, because they felt that it would cause confusion in the marketplace with their Barbie brand because they had a character named Todd. Seriously, that was their reasoning. Never mind that Todd was Todd McFarlane's actual name. Does anyone even remember this Barbie character now? Did this cause you confusion? Oh wait, never mind, yeah. I'm actually pretty confused right now. But the company was unfazed. The name would quickly be changed to McFarlane Toys, and the company would go on to essentially revolutionize toy making. The company would continue their Spawn line, of course, but would also find success with many other lines, such as Tortured Souls, Movie Maniacs, Dragons, and sports figures. in 2020, McFarlane launched a crowdfunding campaign through Kickstarter to pay tribute to the launch of his company by releasing a brand new, updated action figure of the very first Spawn. The campaign met its funding goal within minutes, going on to bring in over $2 million and become the most successful action figure campaign on Kickstarter. It's clear that Spawn and McFarlane Toys are still quite important to action figure collectors. Todd McFarlane launching his own toy company in 1994 inspired other artists to follow suit. The genre of the designer toy was born, and more importantly than that, this was arguably the birth of the collectible action figure. Just 1 year after the first wave of Spawn figures hit store shelves, Star Wars made its return to toy aisles with the Power of the Force 2 line of action figures. It of course also had a huge collector market going for it, and soon many toy companies would follow up with their very own collector marketed lines. But McFarlane Toys was one of the very first toy companies to proudly exclaim that toys weren't just for kids. And that is why Spawn deserves its place in toy history. Hey guys, thank you so much for joining me for another episode. This ended up being a topic that was a lot of fun to research. I was inspired to look into it once the Spawn Kickstarter began, and it ended up being a total blast. I have to start by giving a very special thanks to the Todd father himself, Todd McFarlane, who spent an hour and a half chatting with me, and it was awesome because he was happy to answer questions for this specific episode about the start of the company, and that actually helped me out a lot because his information, his firsthand information, was different than everything that I had researched. So that was really awesome. If you haven't already seen my full interview with Todd, it's mostly about the Kickstarter and modern day stuff, but make sure you guys do that as well. It was awesome that he took the time to do that. Of course, I have to give a shout out to our sponsor over at Megalopolis, City of Collectibles. The link is in the video description. And of course, all of you on Patreon whose names have been scrolling across the screen. Thank you guys so much for your continued support. I mean that. I really mean that. I could not be doing this without you guys. Thank you all so much for watching, for your comments, for liking, and stay tuned. We got more of these on the way. Until next time, my friends.